Welcome to the Freight Forward podcast with your host, Nicola Hughes.
Hi, Kimberly. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the Freight Forward podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Kimberly Reuter, and I am a supply chain expert. Some people call me a guru, and I have been working in supply chain for probably over 30 years. I started in the broker and freight forwarding world on the East Coast of the United States, and then sort of progressed through the e-commerce businesses, starting off with Amazon on the West Coast, working at Nordstrom. And then, of course, I've been doing my own thing for a while. So I work in all things e-commerce and retail supply chain.
Well, so broadly speaking, what does e-commerce in the freight industry mean to you?
Just about everything. As we know, it is the future of commerce is e-commerce. I guess the future is now. But for freight forwarders and brokers, the e-commerce touches everything. From how we ship it, inventory management, value-added services that we're able to do overseas. It's everything in e-commerce, and it's certainly shifted in the last few years.
What kind of shift have you seen in the supply chain in general throughout your career?
When I started a long time ago, freight was mostly containerized freight. It was retail and went to distribution centers. It was handled multiple times. And that's mostly what everyone worked with, right? But through the years, through e-commerce and the changes in how we do business, reaching out direct to consumer, especially global direct to consumer, now we have a situation where supply chains need to be faster, more nimble, and they're actually, believe it or not, what I call small supply chains, because we're dealing with small packages now. We're no longer dealing with just 40 footers and row. Now we have to be able to attack things like pre-labeling individual orders overseas for injection into mail networks. It's become really almost like micro supply chains.
And how has e-commerce transformed the traditional freight and logistics sector?
Well, so right there with being able to work smaller, but also the demand has changed. Speed has changed. We want it faster. Inventory pools are getting smaller. We're trying to do more just in time. E-commerce is a much faster, much more nimble supply chain than we're used to. And so that's been a really big shift in the market.
For a small to medium freight forwarder, what opportunities would you say exist within e-commerce?
All of them. There is a ton of opportunity for small to medium freight forwarders and brokers in the e-commerce space because of some of these shifts that we've been talking about. So not only has the capacity shifted or the inventory shifted, what's also shifted are the companies that are participating in e-commerce. Through marketplaces like Walmart and Target and Amazon, we have a lot more smaller buyers and importers who maybe only do a couple $1 million a year. But to them, that is everything. So, we're seeing a lot of smaller players who need more bespoke services and want a freight forwarder and broker who speaks their language, who may be able to do a little more value add service, hold their hands a little bit more, because they're not used to importing. They're not Ford, they're not Target, they're not Walmart. They don't know anything about importing. So they're looking for someone to sort of educate them. And I think that's an opportunity for small, medium brokers and freight forwarders.
And how have customer expectations with that evolved through the growth of e-commerce? And how does that impact the freight companies?
So, as we know, we're all very familiar with the prime effect, which is now global. It used to only be a US problem for many years, but now we have it everywhere. And so that is training the customer to expect to get their inventory or their orders right away, right? So, when Amazon started Prime, it was in an effort to try to duplicate the retail experience, right? And the retail experience is I go in, I interact with something, I buy it, I walk out with it. And at the time, the customer's demand kind of was going in that direction. Like, we want to have the same experience. So, that expectation that I will get my stuff in 1 day or 2 days has really shifted customer expectations in e-commerce. And so as we further go upstream in supply chain, that has changed how freight forwarders and brokers have to be able to do business, because more than anything now, inventory and stock is huge, because you can't do 1 to 2 day delivery if you don't have inventory in stock. If we roll back 20 years, it used to be normal to wait for 2 weeks to a month for your package to come in. That was acceptable. So now freight forwarders and brokers are a big part of inventory management, of planning. And again, we have a lot of smaller players in the space.
What role does customer service play in the success of e-commerce freight solutions?
Well, so when we're talking about customer service, again, we go back to that education piece and being there for them and being able to answer their questions, and with the growth of small and medium importers and buyers, being able to answer their questions, 24/7 support, all these things are what they're looking for. Again, when we look at these marketplaces like Amazon and Target and Walmart, what they've done is they've made it very easy for importers and sellers to sell on these platforms. So what has happened is that they've been somewhat conditioned to think that I can push a button and all of my problems will be solved. But of course, as we all know, when it comes to freight forwarding and brokering, especially if you're going to try to do multiple countries and expand globally, it's much more complex than that. But unfortunately, these sellers and buyers have been conditioned to think that, hey, I just push a button and everything's taken care of. So when we look at customer service and freight forwarding broking, it's key to have that to help them understand the nuances of what they're doing and how do they be successful in this space.
And what role does technology play in enhancing efficiency and helping with things like that?
It's everything today. I don't want to get too deep into technology because that is a conversation for hours. But you have to have technology. It is table stakes for you to have technology and be able to integrate. And the key things that you need to be able to do is, one, you have to be able to have tracking, visible tracking, so they can see what's going on with their orders, their booking, their consoles, whatever that they're doing with you. So tracking is definitely table stakes. And then some of the more sophisticated brokers and freight forwarders are doing things around inventory management, PO management, more forward-looking analytics, and really trying to help their importer or buyer or exporter plan a little bit better.
How do global trends such as trade policies and sustainability initiatives influence e-commerce logistics?
I would go out on a limb and say it impacts e-commerce logistics maybe more than most supply chains. And again, it's back to that because we're dealing in micro supply chains, as I like to call them, like small packages. So the impact is multiplied, right? So sustainability, we'll start with sustainability. That is a huge initiative: carbon offsetting, green packaging, efficient transportation. Those are huge initiatives in around the globe, not just in the United States. We're seeing initiatives in Europe. We're seeing initiatives in Africa. There's all kinds of initiatives to try to increase sustainability. That impacts supply chain because you have to source differently. We also need to manage supply chains more tightly. Part of that CO2 emission and managing the waste in supply chain is around having good, tight supply chains. So sustainability has definitely impacted the supply chain. And then with global trade policies, that has a huge effect, especially when we're looking at things like protective tariffs that are being thrown around the world now, trying to use for political favor. Any sort of initiatives changing the regulation of imports, especially in small packages, is going to have a huge impact. And what we see is supply chain is resilient, believe it or not. And so we're seeing people do business different ways, right? We're seeing people try to get around tariffs, trying to get around port congestion. People are getting creative. So there's an impact, but I see supply chain responding to it very quickly.
Yeah, so adaptability is key there.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you foresee as the future trends and developments in e-commerce logistics over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, obviously, technology is going to continue to play a role. There's, again, not a conversation for multiple hours. There's lots of conversation around AI and how is AI going to impact supply chain? And more importantly, there's some interesting thoughts out there on how AI is going to change people's shopping experience, right? Which will influence supply chain, further upstream. So, I think the biggest technologies that small, medium, brokers and freight forwarders for the immediate future, the biggest thing is integration. You need to be able to quickly and seamlessly integrate with your partners. And this is something I bump into all the time in the market. These 6 and 3 month integrations, and we got to do all this EDI mapping. Those things are disappearing in the market, especially for small and mediums, because they don't have that infrastructure. Typically, they have an off-the-shelf ERP or inventory management system that they've bought some sort of software. So being able to integrate is going to be the big differentiator, and being able to do it simply and quickly. That is the key to technology success for brokers and freight forwarders today.
Well, and how can freight companies prepare themselves to stay competitive in an ever-evolving e-commerce landscape?
Oh, there's so many to talk about here. Obviously, we're going to talk about a bunch of the stuff at the conference in Bangkok. Technology, we've talked about that. Easy to integrate technology. I cannot emphasize enough easy integration. The most successful technology companies I'm seeing out there today have easy integration. Almost, they're able to do autonomous data integrations, machine learning, the mapping is being done, is automated now. So integration, I can't stress enough on integration. That is a big piece. But the other piece that's very important is being able to add value to the supply chain. And in e-commerce, those things look like what we talked about, like tracking, helping with inventory management, planning, how are we ordering right? Is it going to make it in time? Because a lot of companies are running just-in-time inventory or less than 60 days inventory. I mean, that's the goal. So inventory planning is huge for them. That's a value add, but also value adds in the supply chain. A lot of small, medium importers and buyers can't do 40 footers all the time. They need console operations. They need things prepped for ingestion into the marketplace that they're going into. Maybe they need Amazon prep or Walmart prep. They need labels or stickers or wrap or whatever that they need in order to have a good, smooth, seamless ingestion into the marketplace that they're going to use. And then the other value add is being able to help prepare packages for ingestion into the delivery last mile network that is going to be used by the importer or exporter. So, those are kind of 3 that I focus on when I'm talking to small mediums. Get your technology straight, make sure it's easy to be integrated. Add value to the supply chain by offering, smaller loads, consolidations, faster or slower movement, depending on what the importer exporter needs. And then also support them in what they need in their supply chain. Do they need smaller packaging, bigger packaging? Does it need to be ready to ingest into somebody else's network? Those are kind of the 3 big value adds that I see in the market today.
Oh, and any final advice or key takeaways for freight industry professionals looking to navigate into e-commerce?
Yes. First and foremost, this technology, you're going to need some good technology to compete in the space. That's table stakes in today's world. And you need to, at a minimum, you have to have tracking. Ideally, you're doing some sort of inventory management, PO analytics to help your exporter importer manage their inventory better. So technology is a big takeaway that small mediums need to look at. And then the other piece is to look at how can you add value to your exporter or importer, especially keeping in mind that they are likely smaller importers and exporters, maybe don't have as much experience in that. So they're looking for slightly more bespoke solutions. They're looking for education. They're looking for guidance. So anything that you can do around there and helping them build their confidence, especially if they're looking at global expansion. A lot of companies do well in one market and they want to expand into new markets. As we all know in this industry, the laws and regulations are vastly different in every single country. So, the biggest value that you can add to your import or export is helping them understand that and helping them grow. And another thing, if you're a small, medium broker, freight forwarder, and you're interested in getting in the e-commerce space, as we've been talking about, we're having a great conference in Bangkok with the WCA from September 14th through 16th. And we will actually be talking about these topics. I will be giving a presentation on how small, medium freight forwarders and brokers can compete in the e-commerce space and the changes in supply chain. And we'll be talking in more detail about that. And we will also have a panel where we will be discussing some of the issues that are happening in other countries from our industry experts and how they are addressing those in their individual countries. So we'll have a lot of opportunity at the conference in Bangkok to learn. Of course, I'm there to meet and greet and talk to anybody who may want to chat. And then we have a great networking meeting going as well during that. So if you're interested in getting into the space, I think Bangkok is a place for you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kimberly. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
See you in Bangkok.